Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Influence Gap. I'm Crystal Golightly, joined with my fantastic co-host Nathan Herman. And today's guest is Jamin Spitzer, one of my good friends, and I kind of think the metric guru for all things AR, PR, and probably comms and marketing. With that being said, okay, I'm glad that you co-signed
Mhm.
that. Jamin, would you please give us an intro on yourself, who you are, how do we know each other, and what
Yeah,
people might be interested in?
you bet. So I'm going to shut my door so my daughter's screaming doesn't come into the microphone. So I took a interesting route to where I am today, which is I first of all I started my career in politics, and then in the .com era, all these guys I knew from college were making a lot of money, and I was always into tech and like gadgets and stuff. And I was like, well, I could do that. And so I left politics and started working in tech. And I had been a press secretary on Capitol Hill. And so it made sense to go into comms in a corporate environment. And one way or the other, I found myself doing my first AR job. I won't say when, because that would show how old I am. And I'm not supposed to do that anymore because I'm no longer of employable age. And so I started doing AR. I was like, wow, this is really cool and interesting. And I did successive AR jobs at different companies. The company I was working with got acquired by a company in the Bay Area. They asked me to move to the Bay Area, and I was like, all right, yeah, I'll look at that. And then they told me they offered me a tiny little cost of living adjustment to move there. And I was like, you got to be kidding me and my dog in my backyard. Like, what? And so my college roommate was at Microsoft at the time, and he was like, "Hey, if you'd move to San Francisco, would you move to Seattle?" And I was like, "All right, yeah, I'll look into it." And
Slightly
so,
worse weather. It's fine.
yeah, yeah.
Better weather.
Well, I'd been to Seattle like once before, and I was like, "All right, I'll look at that." And so he put me in touch with a recruiter, and before I knew it, like I was on Microsoft campus for a full day thing, and the weather was gorgeous. It was beautiful. It was the middle of February. And I was like, oh man, this place is awesome, right? That was always like this. And so they offered me a role. And so in 2004, I moved to Seattle area, live in the city. I'm not a suburbs person. And so I started working in Microsoft Analyst Relations. And a couple of years later, I took over the function. It's a little different now than it was then, which is that many of the AR people were in the different product teams. There was not a centralized AR function the way there is now, but I was the titular head of Microsoft AR, which meant doing the sort of the most high level corporate activities. And I had a couple occasions to staff Steve Ballmer at Gartner Symposium and hosted different Gartner campus engagements where I had, Bill and Steve and Ray Ozzie and Jeff
It's a
Rakes.
different Microsoft. That is
Yeah.
a very, yeah.
Yeah. And that was pretty cool. Like Bill was by the time I got into that role, Bill was no longer CEO. Bill was spending more of his time with the foundation. So it wasn't like the full on Bill experience, but it was pretty cool. And like, to get Bill in a meeting where he just starts arguing with an analyst was awesome.
I would pay money for that. I feel like that had to have been a little bit of a movable force meets unmovable object,
No,
or whatever the saying is.
it was, it was, uh, it was an immovable force and an object that cowered under the table.
That makes sense.
There's some levels where I don't, I mean, I want to make this very politically correct. Bill has a certain amount of intensity that he would bring, and he brought a lot of intensity in that moment. And the analysts, A, I don't think were prepared for it, and B, had said something that I think they very quickly realized that they couldn't defend. They just withered like a bouquet out of water.
In the world of premium streaming events,
Yeah.
I kind of want to see a Gartner contract negotiation involving CEO of Microsoft, whoever it is, versus Gartner account executives.
Oh no, they didn't. They didn't do that.
No,
And
I
this,
know, but
yeah,
I kind of want to see that. I feel
yeah,
like it would be entertaining.
yeah. No, I would do the
That
contract.
might be a new revenue stream.
I did. I
Oh
mean,
my God, the reality shows of
reality shows.
enterprise technology influence. How about that? And there we go, folks. We brought it back to influence here.
One time, my Gartner rep emailed the COO of the company to say, "Hey, we've got this new offering." And then he came back to me and said, "Oh, can you help me, market this around?" And I was like, "Dude, don't email the COO of Microsoft and then act like you need my help. Go ask him. You're such good terms with him. Go ask him. He'll help you now." That product never sold at that company because no, even Gartner needs an internal champion to
Yeah,
go and help, make the recommendations, set up the meetings. Like, oh, you should go talk to this person. This might be in their wheelhouse.
Medpick Gartner.
Yeah. So that product didn't land there.
I'm fascinated though. This is the first time we've ever spoken. You were in big tech, high tech at maybe its most television worthy period of time, right? So I think you said 2004 is when you started at Microsoft. Post.com bubble burst. Now, fast forward, more than 20 years, we're potentially on the verge of another bubble burst. Some people would say
Yep.
more than that.
Yep.
Marketing is moving to a place where it looks nothing like what it looked like in 2004.
Totally. It's totally utterly different.
Yeah.
It's totally utterly different. I mean, to think about how we would talk about what we were doing, from an AR perspective, from a PR perspective, it was, and the other thing I will say that is probably same and probably different is we had a thing which was big, bold goals. And part of this was, when companies get successful, sometimes the metrics that matter for the people inside the company are no longer the things that actually matter to the company being successful in market, right? Which is it gotten to the point where Microsoft had gotten so big that there weren't a lot of things that you were going to do over a 12-month period that were actually going to really have a whole lot of change and impact on revenue. So the way in which you had to be successful as an employee is to do something big that people noticed. And so you had all these people taking their shot and all these other people just cleaning up the messes. And people would get rewarded for taking their shot, even if they didn't land their shot, because, oh, that guy can take a shot, give him a bigger job. And so you had these kind of swashbucklers that would just keep failing up. And, the rest of us that were kind of there just trying to solve, keep the thing going day to day. We also were at a period where like company had stagnated. There was no new growth, right? Windows was
Well,
minting money. Office was minting money. We were pre-Web 2.0. And so, yeah, it took it took a journey. And then, actually the reason I left AR was the Web 2.0 stuff. And I left AR to take a job in developer marketing, where we started talking about, we used to call it software plus services. And, part of that was like reminding people that in this Web 2 services era, software still mattered, like stuff running on a client device. It still mattered. Isn't all, the whole world isn't going to be the browser, right? But the other part of that was like, we used to affectionately call this job blocking punches with our face, which is how do you,
Damon,
yeah,
I'm sorry, before you go too far away from your time in AR, a couple of little things. I had to just go and search, like compare 2004 to today,
yeah,
Microsoft market cap, right? I mean, the value of Microsoft back then, according to Gemini, is 291 billion, which
mhm,
is big.
big.
yeah,
But today it's nearly 3 trillion,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So like crazy different. And the one thing that you kind of sparked in my mind was, and actually, Nathan, you punctuated for me a little bit because you were kind of alluding to the cyclical nature of time and things happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you think about 2004 and today, and you had said that back then you were in the business units,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we talk a lot about AR and where AR is and how there's like a maturity model of, in your nascent sort of times, you oftentimes see AR embedded in the business unit and not necessarily centralized. And I think it's interesting that you talk about Microsoft back in the day like that. And it kind of seems like it's interesting because that is part of this progression. But I think now you're seeing more teams in the business units. I think we're seeing a trend of that.
Mm-hmm.
I know that, yes, there's still lots of teams in marketing. Yes, there's still lots of teams in comms, right? But for instance, Google is in the product side of the business. I believe they sit with product marketing. And so that's more in the business unit than in those other functions. We talk about this all the time, Nathan. We want to see AR being more in a strategy role. So
Yeah. I
it
mean,
was really interesting to hear about Microsoft, especially because 300 billion was a lot of money back then. I mean, it's a lot of money today, but back then it was
and I think about
a
all
lot
of
of.
those stock grants that I sold when like the stock was in its 30s. You sold your stock because it's kind of like part of how you're living. And it's like, oh man, I could have been a lot better off. I was a little more frugal. But yeah, and the thing about the way AR played out there is I think every AR person has probably gone through the executive interaction of like these analysts, it's just a shakedown. Oh, these guys, they don't understand our business. I've had that conversation for 20 plus years. And the answer I always came back to was like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that they don't know your business as well as you do. It doesn't matter that they don't even understand your technology. Because the fact is, your customers and prospects are confused. And your customers and prospects hear from us and 4 other companies. And we use different words to talk about the same things. And they're so thoroughly confused, they don't know who to trust. And the one group of people they can trust is somebody who they think at least knows enough to give them an honest answer.
What a perfect encapsulation of influence in just this larger conversation. Because yes, we've all had that conversation. But what you're saying is, company A, B, C, and D are saying the same thing. Buyers confused. They view analysts as influential. So they're going to listen to the analysts. So to the executive, it's not important if they know things as deeply as you because what they say matters. And I think obviously we've entered a world in the analyst ecosystem where maybe not all analysts have that same level of influence as, Gartner traditionally. But then when you zoom out and look at some of the other work you're doing, this applies to influencers writ large. Like there are people with giant megaphones on the internet now, and their content is being fed into LLMs. And people that are confused are going to LLMs and asking about the best disaster recovery software. It's it's the same human need to validate your thinking and assumptions
Yeah.
through an expert.
Yeah.
But what's becoming more challenging is determining who are the experts with influence.
Yes. That's right. That's exactly right. And it's who are the experts with influence and who are the influencers with expertise and who are the influencers that are actually influencing in this new world is the many to many for influencers and the many to many for the people consuming that influence. To just go full, just to finish the story. So I was at Microsoft for 16 years. In 2014, Satya put out a memo that said, we need to be a more data-driven company. We need to use data to drive better decisions. And at that time, the Microsoft comms function of AR, PR, and so forth had not really been very evolved. And I put my hand up and was like, hey, I've always been a comms guy that's good at math. Can I take over that function? And they were like, yes, please do it. And so
Which, by the way, is a super rare mashup.
yeah, I might have, if I had known this tech thing would have been so big when I was back in college, I probably would have taken harder classes and done it and done the hard work instead of getting a political science degree. But alas, so I basically took this job where I was a comms guy doing a data job, and as opposed to sort of a traditional hire, right, which is like get a guy that has the data chops. But I actually really found my home in it, and I realized that there's actually a missing piece, which is the ability to translate between what the data can do to the storytelling around the data and landing the data in a meaningful way with the stakeholders to drive improvement on behalf of the business.
That is so important.
And so I did it for Microsoft for like 5 years, ripped out a bunch of old technology, standardized on a global platform, pushed the company hard, including creating the kinds of KPIs that drive the right types of behaviors. Because it's really easy to say, like, oh, give me this KPI. It's a share of voice this, and it's 15 reports that. And like, if you want to find out how people are behaved, find out how they're measured, right? And you have to come up with the right organizational measurements that are going to produce the right organizational outcomes and orchestrating that from the end, right? What is the market outcome that an organization or a person should be pursuing, and then figure out how to work backwards from there into the right types of activities that you want to incent. If you want people to, land 4 reports in a quarter, that's what they're going to do, right? If you say, I want to move my dot, a quarter inch up and to the right, like that's what their focus is going to be. And you have to actually think about what are the market outcomes that the company needs from this person or this team, and then measure that, and you'll actually get people to execute on what it is the company needs. So I
So
did this at Microsoft for a while. In 2020, it had been 16 years, and I had this crazy idea, which is that if I can do this at this company, maybe I can leave, start my own business, and do this for multiple companies at once. And so that was the crazy idea, because we were all feverish with COVID, whether we had it or not. We were all needing to do something. So that's what I did. And 6 years later, I'm still in business, knock on wood. And it's been great. I've had a lot of awesome customers in AR and PR. I work with Amazon, T-Mobile, Salesforce, a couple folks outside of tech. I've done projects for like Nike and Honeywell. And so
that's really cool.
it's been really rewarding. We're still a small team.
Just small companies that you may or may not have heard of or something.
Well, I can't really work that much with small companies
Yeah,
because
I know. I
well,
was being sarcastic.
yeah, no, I know, but there's actually like I can go to mid market, but the thing is, like, you need enough data to make it worth everybody spending time torturing the data, because you got to torture the data until it confesses. And if you're going to do that, like, you have to actually have enough data to say there's a meaningful signal here. And so you need a company with a pretty big, whether it's an AR or a PR, even employee comms, customer research, you need enough data to actually make it meaningful to find signal.
We live in a time where I would say you can almost signal yourself to death. There are so many signal sources externally and internally. It's overwhelming, right? AI has made this worse, arguably. How do you wade through all of that noise? And maybe you're dealing with this right now. How do you
Yeah.
wade through all of that noise and still find the signal that's meaningful, and also, the story you want to tell alongside it?
Yeah. And I think it is certainly a noisy time, right?
Well,
And
look at how many tech companies sell different platforms that plug into the company. You have all of a sudden 18 different tools that's
it's
feeding your business intelligence.
and they're all plugging in different ways. And it's like, and again, they're selling different things with the same names and the same names for different things. And, there's, I don't know, 30, 40 different companies out there offering a GEO tool. that all do different things, and you got to go deep and figure out what's the right tool that you're going to use here. And I'd say the other piece that is both a blessing and a curse right now is AI can automate a lot of this stuff, right? And so the 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 baseline of what anybody wants to do from a data or measurement perspective is like, okay, AI can do that now, right? So what you are offering, what you're selling needs to go far beyond what somebody else can automate. I don't know about you guys, but like I'm I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, and like I get solicited so much through
Yes.
LinkedIn in my email.
Yes.
Like my email was a pretty clean place until I started being on LinkedIn more. And
Right.
now like
Yes.
everything from like bookkeeping to virtual assistants, like the amount of
I
people that
get SOC too. And I'm like,
Are you SOC 2 compliant personally, Crystal?
no, but I've worked at a number of companies that have been.
I,
Yeah,
You know
well,
but
what's in
yeah, it's crazy. Why are you talking to? I am not the right role. You just
Ja-
wasted a token or something, like
Jamin, you know what's interesting? You're correct. The baseline is now what AI can do plus one, two, three, four. I've seen a lot more, and this is like probably just TikTok being TikTok or LinkedIn Reels being LinkedIn Reels. I've seen a lot more podcasts with CEOs of like startups or small companies saying, we eliminated this entire platform or this
mhm.
entire function because we could build an agent to do it. So this is obviously having an effect on the software market as it is today. Obviously, this pendulum is going to swing back because people are going to realize the agent they built has to be maintained and updated, and so then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I really need a company to do that thing for me. I don't want to do it myself.
So I had I've been doing a bunch of these GEO projects, and they're fascinating. And the reason I was bringing up the LinkedIn, I get offered GEO work on behalf of my company, right? And I sign up every time. I'm like, yeah, bring it. I'd love to see it. And like the reports suck. It's somebody scraped my website and found the keywords of what I did, told AI to figure out what I do, took AI, it's all automated, right? It's a bunch of
Yeah.
agents working, and that basically sends me a report that no one has ever seen or touched, that auto generated, 40 prompts, 20 prompts, and then gave back to me the most superficial analysis and like, oh, here's the recommendation, spend money with us, go buy some SEO. I'm like, buy SEO? Like, I only have $1 billion, $500 million customers. Like, I'm not finding my next customer through SEO. I'm finding my next customer because Nathan or Crystal has said, like, go talk to Jamin because he's got some smart ideas. And it's a 3 to 6 month sales cycle at minimum, building a relationship. My
And
SEO is useless to me.
you just hit on something that keeps coming up in these conversations, which is the human element. Like, no matter how many tools are created, no matter what's automated, like, it is always coming back to humans. That makes me feel good,
Yeah.
genuinely.
Yeah, I did. So I started these GEOs where I was like, oh man, I'm gonna automate this and I'm gonna automate that. I started there. I did a hasty retreat, and I was like, I need to be closer to what's actually really happening. And so now when I run GEO, it's a combination of like these automations and constant human in
humans.
the loop.
Jamin, you'll love this. So I am in the land of AI land or whatever right now. I'm in the Bay Area. And as I was driving back from SFO to where
To
we're staying,
to add to that, can I just say my favorite billboard I see when leaving SFO, and maybe you're about to talk about this one, is the one that's like automate your workforce or whatever. There's like a sign that is like basically saying get rid of your employees.
Yeah.
okay, no, I am actually going to tell you about a billboard that is the
Okay.
actual opposite of that. Okay.
Okay.
And I think the company was like Rev.io or Rev.ai or something. I should have taken a picture, but it said, would you hire someone that hallucinates 10% of the time? No, we didn't think so. And I was like,
That's a great marketing campaign.
yes. Now you have me thinking twice about every single automation, this is good enough decision, right? It was fascinating. Now, on my way out of California, I am going to look for that stinging thing and I'm going to take a picture and maybe, share it on LinkedIn. But yeah, would you hire someone that hallucinates 10% of the time? And it's like, no, absolutely not.
I don't want
It's
to
interesting.
go. I don't want to go too deep in the hallucination piece because, like, we could spend a really long time on it,
Oh yeah.
and it is super real. But I will say, I hear people that are like complaining about the hallucination, and I'm like, did you prompt correctly? Did you map workflow and process? Because if you didn't, it didn't hallucinate. It just got the wrong instructions.
You were just lazy or
Yeah.
Did you?
didn't know. Yeah.
Did
There
you?
is.
I
Did you build in stage audits to check along the way that your multi-stage agentic workflow process is actually operating at each stage? And is the AI stopping itself to say, hey, wait, hold on a minute. This isn't what I'm
yeah.
entering a seam. And that you can't have, if you've got these workflows, you can't have seams where one window is talking to another window and they're talking about different things and they get left off. And once you start, like, people will figure this out, right? There's
Well,
going to be a role for people
that
to make these workflows work.
this goes back to my days teaching high school because the same, if I was writing a test, also no one understands how hard it is to actually write a test. Let's just make that
Hmm.
very clear. Like, because you need to think through it deeply. And if it's an essay question, for example, you have to be very explicit about what you want students to produce. Or if it's a long-term research project, you have to be very explicit about here is the kind of overall mission I'm giving you, here are the checkpoints, here are the stages. It is very much the same concept. Like, I don't do a ton of complex prompting with AI, but many times the quality of the response, like you said, from the LLM is entirely based on how explicit and specific you are with it. So it's honestly interesting because I feel in a lot of ways we're all just becoming project writers where we're saying, okay, student, this is what I want you to do, and these are the expected outcomes. And if you need help, come to my office hour. It's the same equivalent process.
Yeah.
So whenever I'm asking, Gemini is like my go-to LLM right now because I've been focusing a lot on actually building the website for this podcast. And what's hilarious is whenever I get a result that I wasn't expecting or it's like completely wrong and it like screws up the image or like whatever, I'm like, what did I do wrong here? 100% of the time, it is because I was not explicit, I was vague, and I wasn't taking into account what it's actually having to do every time I'm asking for
I,
some type of an adjustment.
I've also noticed that the further down a chain of prompts I get, and maybe this is just me
Yes.
being bad, so please tell me, the further down a chain of prompts I get, if the information starts to, or if the responses start to come out wrong, it's oftentimes because I've provided poor quality higher up in the chain of prompts. So all of a sudden, crap in, crap out, right? Like if I don't do a good enough job up front, by the end, when I'm trying to do the more complex task, I'm just getting frustrated and wanting to yell at the AI, which don't do. It's gonna take over. We know this. Treat it like you want to be treated. But yeah,
It'll remember.
yeah, it'll
Speaking
remember
sport.
100%.
Yeah, I've experienced the same thing, Nathan. The
Yeah.
further you go down, it starts freaking out. But I think also we're getting lazy. We're like, well, just do this. And it's like,
100% laziness.
yeah.
I will admit to that.
Do you find the same trend, Jamin, as you're doing metrics in this GEO world?
Well, I mean, the GEO world needs, I would say, a decent amount of coaxing, and it needs, especially for AR, it needs a good amount of domain knowledge because it's fairly easy to think you're running GEO for AR and you're not. You're running GEO for content marketing. And
Interesting.
Explain what the
Yeah.
difference is. I'm
so,
curious.
yeah, so a content marketer is trying to figure out like how many eyeballs see their content, right?
And what should I write?
What should I write that's going to get more eyeballs to read my
Yeah.
content, right? Or in this, increasingly important, right? Because we are marketing to machines now, and the AR person, AR has always been this sort of AR, and the analysts are always the kind of these invisible voices in the market that are leading the marketplaces with very little fingerprint.
You don't see a
And
lot of their work. It's behind the scenes. It's behind the paywall.
yeah, it's behind the paywall. It's one-to-one with customers. And so how you actually figure out that impact in a GEO world, one of the things so I did a little homework ahead of coming to you guys today, and I basically did a 6-part GEO study on 6 different tech markets to see what would happen if I just didn't have a customer, but I just wrote a big bonking load of prompts and saw what happened outside of the context of my existing customers. And like, it's
It's
super
interesting.
interesting. Yeah, it's super interesting. One of the things that people always seem to think when they get into like, oh, I can, if the LLMs will find me, I'll be very influential, right? And
Not true.
not true.
The LLMs cited me. Somebody sent me a screenshot at work. I'd done a post about a retail case study, basically, and it ended up blowing up on LinkedIn. So somebody put in a prompt about kind of that general topic, and it cited my post on LinkedIn as like expertise. I can assure you it wasn't, but yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Carry on. Sorry.
Yeah, no, no, no. And the thing that I think is super interesting is, I mean, all of the analyst firms, or I should say at least the big ones, a lot of their content, even if you as a human can read it, most of the analyst content, including a lot of the vendor reprints, don't let the crawlers from the
Hmm,
LLMs crawl the content.
interesting.
So if you have a great Gartner Magic Quadrant and you write your blog post and you put it out there, and you don't even have like a marketing gate in front of it, those like sign up for this thing, and you got to go through like 3 screens of entering your personal information before they finally let you open the thing. Suppose you don't even have those. I see them. Hello there. If most of the analyst reprints are hosted still on the analyst domain,
Gardner being the primary example.
Gartner, Forrester, IDC, it's still hosted on the domain. So the LLM can't crawl that document. The LLM typically doesn't ingest graphics. Like, it can, but it costs a lot of tokens to actually look at all that data and make sense of it, right? Like, you post a photo in your chat box, it does the token work to go read that. But when it's out there crawling the web, it's not ingesting PDFs and JPEGs. It's built to ingest massive, massive volumes of text. And so if you get a 404 error on Gartner.com on your reprint and it can't actually see the image, like, what is really teaching the LLM about what's happening in that market? And so the AR for GEO becomes a different set of goalposts. Analyst blogs matter a ton.
Yep.
Your reprints matter a ton.
And if the reprints are hosted on a vendor website, an analyst firm website, when you set up that landing page to redirect to it, ensuring that you have enough context there for the LLMs to make use of, right?
The LLM needs to make use of your landing page because some of the time they can't actually
Yep.
access the report that your landing page is leading them to.
Then
This
I also did some research here again because I'm building a website, and oh, there's my mom as well. And I don't know if she can see. And there are very specific ways the models want you to put specific things on the page. And yeah,
Schemas, structures, yes.
it is
Yeah,
it's a whole situation,
Yeah.
both on the person reporting as well as the person who's like the webmaster thinking about the strategic footprint.
I mean, in an era of shrinking budgets, I think all of these kind of reinforce why companies probably should be spending even more on public relations and even
Yeah.
more on marketing because you have to own your narrative for the machines, even more so, arguably, than for your partners and customers, which sounds ridiculous.
Yes.
But if we know that most website traffic in the B2B space is falling off drastically, like many sources have said. More and more people go to AI first, maybe only to AI. And then if they're referred from AI to your landing page, they're more likely to convert. It just makes it so much more important to make sure that you're being talked about in enough places.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing that I think is very interesting for AR is to develop like an analyst layer in how you study your GEO and to identify influence at different stages of the funnel. Now, we could argue that in the software world, the funnel is dead. I don't disagree, but it's actually a useful way to still map your prompts to funnel stages around discovery and evaluation and selection. And where do the analysts show up? Right? The analysts show up primarily in a validation stage. So when you're doing discovery, if you're putting prompts in that are top of funnel, you're not going to really see AR content present. It's much more the vendors in the space. Ton of time, it's the consultants, right? The McKinseys and the Deloittes and those guys that also have, a credibility and have always been analyst adjacent in a lot of ways.
They have research functions and they publish lots of it.
That's right. That's right. And they've always been analyst adjacent. Like, do you want to ask Gartner or do you want to ask Deloitte? And, both of them have a credible leg to stand on to help you make a recommendation. And so at those earlier stages, like those consultants are very much a much bigger piece of the conversation. But in the evaluation stage, that's really where you start seeing analyst content start getting retrieved a whole lot more. And it's reports. I'm of the mind that even if the LLMs can't reach those reports from a retrieval perspective, that to an extent they've already trained on it, legally or not. I mean, I have no proof of that, right? But like the track record of Silicon Valley companies behaving forthrightly with content owners is like 30 years of content owners taking the short end. Right. And so I would call me entirely unsurprised to find out that all that stuff has already been trained. Right.
I mean,
One way or the other.
we've already seen it with actual literature, right? With the different LLMs being trained on people like authors' books and
Yes.
essays, and yeah.
Yes. And so there's more deep in the bowels of the training data than I think the that shows up in the data. But then you have this three levels of data that come out of the GEO that you do, right? The first is what are the retrievals? That's upstream, right? There's some stuff that's just committed to memory that's not getting retrieved. That's where I think there's a bunch of data that's already trained it to think certain ways. But you can get the upstream retrievals, what content actually got retrieved that informed this answer. Second level, you've got the answer itself, right? Third level, you've got the citations that come out. So you see citations, particularly in use Perplexity, but also the ChatGPT and so forth. They all provide you with citations.
And I find myself using the citation piece maybe more so than others, old school Wikipedia style. You can't cite Wikipedia as a source in a college essay, but you can go to the Wikipedia sources and maybe find some to cite.
That's right.
Like It's very similar.
That's right. And the retrievals are in some ways a superset of the citations. So the retrievals are important, but being retrieved and cited is actually more of a demonstration that what's being retrieved is actually informing the answer. At that second level, though, with the answer, all these tools are out there and they're like, hey, we'll give you your company sentiment and we'll give you your prominence and your share of voice. And it's like a bunch of traditional PR metrics, and that's good, right? But if you are an AR person and there's one specific perception that matters most to you in a market that is going to drive you to the short list, and you need to drive that perception change with your tier one analysts,
Yeah.
that perception change is now measurable in the GEO world.
Especially if that's an analyst that's active on social media and talks about companies a lot. Its perception's very easily kind of harvested there.
Yeah. And you can now, it's now even traceable, right? Like that perception shows up and I'm going to A/B test the citations and retrievals in which the perception that I want to drive showing up in my answer or not showing up in my answer, and correlate that to the citations and retrievals associated with the answer that you want to see.
Okay.
It's really funny. You can take the same question with the same chatbot and get wildly different answers from one
Yes.
day to the next.
Yes. And if you take the same prompt and use it across engines, you are going to get a different answer every single time.
Vastly different. Vastly different. I did a project for a company outside of tech, and they were just interested in their perception around their environmental stewardship. And from one day to the next, you saw their sentiment, same question, same LLM, had a sentiment score 20. 2 days later, a day later, sentiment score 77. And it's like, how is that possible? And you trace back, and it's like some days they had the news coverage of their environmental lawsuit, contamination and so forth, that was, and then the next day, it's their own content about, all their ESG content farm stuff. And so you, which day
Like opportunistic in some ways, right? Based off of what is available at that time.
that's right. That's right. And there's no
You
rhyme or reason. So
Yep.
you gotta sample a lot of data. And then for me, like the super nerd thing
and
is like
flatten out the curve or
flat,
something.
flatten out the curve and just give me 100 rabbit holes to go down. And like I will, that's the most exciting part of dealing with data is now I can supercharge it, because instead of my turning to someone on my team and be like, hey, can you research this? Come back to me on, next Wednesday. Like me and Claude can just go to town for 15 minutes and I've got some really interesting things to talk about.
So I'm going to transition us into the last question because we've been
Hold on,
recording for a
Nathan.
bit.
I know we
But
have been, but I want to throw one curveball because you
okay.
were talking about the training data, right? We were talking about that, and then we were talking about the variance of sentiment. Now, my question is, Jamin, what are you seeing when it comes to bias? Right.
Mm,
And I bring this up because I am super friendly with Carolina Milanese on the socials and like the consumer socials, as well as on LinkedIn. And we're friends, right? And she posted something that said something about, and I can't quote it exactly, but it was about the bias that big data or the big tech doesn't want you to know about. And
Mm.
so, from your perspective, like, what are you seeing? Because as I think about this shift from day to day based off of what's available, I also then want to wrap in this fundamental bias based off of the how and the what.
Yeah, there's a whole, if you look at the history of tech and sort of tech bias and certainly AI bias and training data bias. I mean, there's a bunch of people who are smarter about all that stuff than I am, but you see how small biases that go into data create worse biases in data, right? Like you see this in law enforcement now where they're doing a bunch of AI and like most of the AI is trained on white people's faces. And so it is known that people of color are more likely to be inaccurately identified in facial recognition applications than white people. And so who is more likely to be improperly arrested? The white person who there's better training data on, or the person of color who, whether they were involved in the whatever it was or not, that person more often than not that had nothing to do with the specific incident that triggered the arrest, more often than not, there will be unjustified arrests for people of color because there's worse training data. And, these companies don't care, right? They firmly believe that, number one, they are accountable to their investors and their shareholders. Number two, they have to go very, very fast because the tragedy of the commons is such that like nobody has to pay a price really for bad things happening in society, right? Every 18 months, like a big tech CEO gets up and, we need to do better. We expect more of ourselves, da 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 da, and a hand slap and off they go, right? The can't remember who was talking about was like, if the price of a parking ticket is $1 and the cost to parking is $10, no one's going to pay to park, and that's the incentive system that we've created for these companies. So there's nobody that cares that is making these decisions other than we want to be better and faster in market and we need to outmaneuver. And now you even have this sort of nationalistic thing, right? Which is China is very competitive from an AI perspective. So now we even create the greater societal justification for these companies taking shortcuts because we need to let them compete internationally.
It's like the only way that the intrinsic biases will impact is if it's starting to impact revenue. Maybe.
Maybe, right? But gosh, that's a whole topic and like,
Yeah, I know. I didn't mean to actually go down this. I was just like, are you seeing this in like the GEO stuff, right? And these types of metrics. So the social part, absolutely terrifying, but on a little fluffier side is like, are we seeing
so I,
interesting biases? Yeah.
yeah, not explicitly, but I'm looking to differentiate two pieces of abstract product that people are buying. People are paying money for an abstract thing that doesn't exist in the physical world unless it's a device. And so whether you're buying a software package or a cloud offering or a security thing or telecommunications, I mean, all this stuff is just like technological abstractions that are hard to describe. Right. And so I'm kind of wading through that stuff. And there might very well be biases that people that are smarter than me can help figure out. I haven't gotten into to much of that.
That's totally fair.
Yeah, but it's something that's certainly worth looking at. But the other piece I think is worth also mentioning just from an AR perspective is like different firms will percolate at different places and different times. Gartner's clearly the biggest, but like in telco, for example, Omdia is punches way up. And that already shows like the LLMs are showing that. So how these firms get found is to me a fascinating thing because I think there's some long tail people that are going to become very prominent because they've figured out how to populate their content into an LLM so that they can get found by people like me. So I can go to people like Nathan and say, this person or this firm needs to be your next on your tier one list. I think there's a lot of long tail people who are going to be disambiguated and like they're just going to be shouting in an empty theater on Twitter and LinkedIn and no one's going to care.
And I think you just hit on something so crucial that it's not only hedging your bets on being a citable source in an LLM, but also building content and an audience that makes it so. Like, you don't think just producing content for content's sake is going to get you noticed by these models.
The other pieces that we haven't mentioned, which, a lot of AR people, it's kind of a fuzzy line of demarcation, is Gartner Peer Insights,
Yeah.
which is a major, major source for the LLMs. It is between, Gartner and Gartner Peer Insights. Gartner Peer Insights as a separate entity is bigger than Forrester.
I believe that. I believe that. And if you listen to G2, they're one of the most cited sources on LLMs as well.
Yeah.
Because it's another type of third-party data.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And so if you're an AR person or you're a customer person, like, how you show up in those reviews is going to matter tremendously to how the LLMs train on you. And being able to look at that data at the GPI level and the G2 level, and then reverse engineer, where does this show up in the LLM? Like, I'm doing all this GPI work, and I was doing it actually before I started doing the GEO stuff, but I like dug into the GEO from an AR perspective, and I was like, oh, there's Gartner Peer Insights, my old friend.
So this transitions perfectly into what I wanted to ask you to kind of wrap things up today, and maybe we'll play it as a lightning round, which is, you're sitting at this intersection right now of two worlds coming together. Call it the old world if you want to, right? Pre-AI, and now this AI powered everything, AI powered marketing, AI optimized marketing. Imagine you're a CMO, B2B, B2C, it doesn't really matter. What are the things you're focused on most as we come to reckon with this new reality?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think the thing that you have to recognize is that the LLMs are an additional channel that will increasingly eat into your direct customer channels and will
Yeah.
increasingly eat into the other market intermediaries, inclusive of analysts and media and so forth. Everybody likes to cite that media is, a massively sourced LLM contributor, but it doesn't, it's not the same media. It's not your tier one media that are getting
Yeah.
cited by the LLMs. So, like, it's a different target list. It's a different engagement. I also think that's true in AR, that if you decide you're going to market to machines as a content marketer, if you decide you're going to market to machines through analysts as an AR person, it's a different tiering of analysts that are going to have the impact.
Right.
And I think the CMO is right now is thinking about like their content marketing. Like, that's the biggest, like, someone is taking my customers away from me, and now I got to go talk to this machine and I got to figure that out. Right. And I don't think PR or AR are necessarily they're not the highest stakes thing that's getting disrupted right now, but they are also being disrupted. And the smart communications professionals in these different communications, inclusive of employee comms, right, I think is germane here as well. I mean, you want to go reach your employees, land local news. Like, I mean, they read that and see that more than they read the corporate emails, right? And like, you have to market to machines in a way that's going to get your customers, your prospects, your whomever, that these machines are going to corroborate what you say.
Right.
And that's a hard transition for a lot of marketers who haven't had to ever, like, they could say whatever they want, and the market would either believe them or not. But like, some machine is out there deciding whether it's going to reject your marketing message, and it's going to accept or reject your
Yeah.
marketing message based on its coherency to what the rest of the market is already saying about you.
And there's no eye roll or distraction or anything that you can read into it. It's this thing that you have to hunt out and punish the data in order to find. Jamin, this has been a fantastic
We could have gone a whole other
conversation.
hour.
I
We could.
know. This was a fascinating conversation from Jamin Spitzer. No surprise. Every time I talk to you, Jamin, I am both inspired, a little terrified, and I learn so
I
much.
genuinely think we have to do a part 2 at some point as well,
I'd
in the
love to.
not too distant future.
Yeah, we'll have to do a comparative of like how far we've come
Yeah.
from this conversation. We'll summarize this using our favorite LLM to get
I'll
some main
bring-
topics.
And next time I'll bring more of this little study that I did, because I think there's some interesting nuggets that if they are people who are listening, they'll take away some interesting stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's it, folks. Thanks for tuning in
Pleasure.
and talking all things AR, PR, comms, AEO, GEO, and influence on another The Influence Gap. Bye.
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 Bye, guys.
Bye.